and welcome to India First, your fortnightly window to the world of diplomacy, strategy and defense. Last fortnight, India made a determined push to get into the 48-member exclusive club called the Nuclear Suppliers Group, thanks to a firm diplomatic effort led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself. However, NSG plenary held at South Korea's capital Seoul remained inconclusive on India's application to become its newest member, mainly because China opposed India's entry. Majority members, including heavyweights such as the US, the UK, Canada, France, Japan and Australia, seem to have extended their full support, calling India a responsible nuclear nation. Some others raised procedural issues, especially pointing towards the rule that nations who have not signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty cannot become NSG members. Diplomatic sources, however, point out that the real reason behind China's vehement opposition to India's membership was its intention to get long-time ally Pakistan simultaneously admitted into the NSG. So what lies in the future? Can India make another push to get entry into the NSG? Should India make that attempt? To discuss the prospects, we have two experts on the subject with us. Jaidev Ranade on my immediate left, a China expert and a former RANW officer, and Rajesh Rajagopalan, an academic who teaches at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Mr. Ranade, to begin with you first, do you think India's approach to try and get the membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group in the last fortnight or even in the run-up to it was the correct approach?
I think while we can debate, and I certainly don't have the full details about what homework was done, applying for the membership and pushing for the membership is a logical conclusion of what we have been doing so far.
Right.
So I think it was justified, and I would not rule it out. I mean, I would not describe it as a failure, or neither would I say that we should be excessively disappointed. There is another turn to come,
Right.
and we should make an effort. In the process, we are also making it quite clear that people who are opposed to us are also coming out into the open, and I think that is what China has done. There are other countries, smaller countries, which have also expressed their, shall I say, opposition.
Yes.
But I think they found a voice because China really stood firm.
Yes.
And, you know, you did mention about some people saying that China's main consideration was to get Pakistan in. I slightly differ with that. I think their main objective is to ensure that they remain the only Asian country
Right.
which has membership of exclusive and powerful organizations like the United Nations Security Council and NSG.
Right.
And they don't want India to come there. The secondary factor is, of course, that they're using Pakistan to keep us restrained and inside a box. But they have also used this to send a message to the United States that they can successfully challenge the US support to other member nations around the world.
Right.
And I think these are important messages that have gone.
So there are several dynamics playing out actually. China, US, India, US, India, China, all that.
Exactly.
But that we'll talk about it in a little more detail. But Rajesh, you've spoken about it, you've written about why you thought the NSG bid was important and it wasn't a misplaced attempt really.
Absolutely.
Why do you think so?
No, I think we have already spent a few years, we already, I would say, wasted a few years because the four technology control regimes, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, Missile Technology Control Regime, and the other two, Wassenaar and Australia Group, all of this.
Right.
This is part of the commitment that we had made as part of the US-India nuclear deal and as part of the NSG waiver that we got in 2008. So this was something that we had agreed to do, and this is something that we wanted to do partly because we have changed our attitude in terms of looking at these technology control regimes. I mean, and that in a sense the nuclear deal took us in that direction, and even before that our objection had not been so much to the idea of non-proliferation, it was just to the institutional mechanisms of non-proliferation. So we had always been opposed to proliferation in a sense, I mean, in our policies. So this was the logical progression. And so after the NSG waiver, we did want to get into the NSG of 2008, which allowed us to have nuclear commerce, which allowed us to get additional nuclear power plants for Kudankulam and have the French and American nuclear contracts for at least for French and American nuclear power plants. So this was the next step. I mean, we needed to do the liability bill and then all of this. We had a few years we had sort of not really moved on that.
We were not very
proactive.
Yeah.
So we had to do this at some point of time or the other. I mean, this was not, we couldn't have gotten away from it. And I think part of the problem is that NSG actually makes rules that have very, very significant impact. And it was, in fact, one of the rules that the NSG made that cut us off from global nuclear commerce, because in the early 1990s, in 1992, the NSG changed the rule towards what is called full scope safeguards, which basically meant that in order to get even the smallest item, even to get a screwdriver, we needed to put our entire nuclear program under international safeguards, and we were willing to do for specific whatever we were getting from outside, but we were not willing to do it for everything, and so that is one reason why we couldn't get additional reactors, for example, for Kudankulam. So NSG has tremendous capacity to make rules that that everybody else follows and that constrains us significantly. So we really had to get in there at some point of time or the other. And to the extent that we had to make an application, it was best to make it, to give it a good effort, because just putting in an application wouldn't have worked.
And just sitting back wouldn't have helped. Would you think, I mean, you're taking up on your point about China wanting to be a lone Asian member of these powerful bodies. But, if you look back, China has always had this issue with India, that it doesn't want India to rise or go out of its South Asia kind of a domain. So what is the way forward? Because there is the other point of view that if the US had not pushed the other countries like the UK and France and others, and they had not lobbied with them, India probably would not have got the backing of, say, these 38 members that we are talking about out of 48, which is what is reported. Then the US role becomes important. What do you think? I mean, is the US really pushing for India?
Well, let me rephrase what you said, Nitin. One is, of course, that the US did push for us. It did support us. And I think that is also not just the US doing it. It is our own diplomatic relationship with the United States and our own lobbying effort with them, which got them on board. So it was a two-way thing. We can't just say that the US did the only heavy lifting. We also reached out to the other countries. Certainly, our relationship with the US helps. It does give us some kind of diplomatic heft, in the sense that we are able to take advantage of whatever influence the United States has and use it for our benefit. Of course, the US is backing us. But it is the same thing that makes China very nervous. They are extremely nervous about our proximity to the US, our relationship. And I can share with you that some of the Chinese I've been speaking to.
Yeah, you monitor them very well.
Yeah, in fact, they are particularly concerned about our closeness, and they are wondering whether we are going to become an ally. So I do tell them that there's no question of India being an ally. But we will certainly take advantage of what we can get from where we can get it. So that is one of the factors that is keeping us down. But I think this thing about, you're aware that the Chinese have been going on telling the US that let's have a new type of a big power relationship.
G2.
Yeah, sort of, which is that the two of them will decide the fate of the world. The US hasn't acquiesced to that. And this is one of the messages that they're sending, that look, we can successfully challenge you here. You can no longer runs, etc. But these smaller countries like Switzerland, Austria, etc. If you really look at what the NSG has done, and I'm sure he'll be better informed. In effect, they have shown their double standards, because they did give us a waiver. Our track record has been exemplar even then, and now they suddenly introduced this nuclear, the non-proliferation thing. And if you look at the arguments that China has used through this entire process, it is shifted. First, they said no exception should be made for India. Second, they said India and Pakistan should get in together. Third, they said India should sign the NPT. And then they say India and Pakistan should both sign the NPT before getting in. So, I think it's quite...
They keep shifting the goalpost.
And sole effort was to keep us out. And I don't expect them to relent in a hurry.
But as somebody who watches the nuclear world, if I may use that word much more closely than either of us does, what do you think is the way forward? I mean, would there be a constant effort by these smaller countries who hold that power of veto, because it's a consensus-based approach? Say Switzerland or Iceland even saying that we can't make exceptions. But there is some hope apparently that some informal envoy has been appointed now to discuss India's entry. What's the way forward?
That remains to be seen. The objection from some of these smaller countries are, I wouldn't say, is as serious as the objection from China. So they can be brought on. In fact, even though there have been multiple reports and all sorts of somewhat slightly confusing reports coming out of what exactly happened, but from all of those reports, what appears to me at least clearly is that nobody else other than China actually opposed India's membership. They all said, well, we want India in, but there are some procedures to be followed. I mean, there were debates about whether the procedures would come simultaneously or whether procedures would come first, or whether India, I mean, so there were a variety of issues that were discussed in terms of those sorts of issues, but it was not objection to India per se. So I think to some extent these countries can be brought around, because I think there is especially considering both our history in terms of the nuclear, our relationship to the nuclear order, but also our relationship with most of these countries. All of them are fairly friendly relations, and I don't think they are going to be a huge obstacle. I think the real problem would be with in terms of how do we manage China. But even there, I think there may be a way forward, partly because I think this episode, even though we were focused so much on the fact that we didn't get in, I think internally within China, and Mr. Anand is much better informed than I am about the Chinese politics, but there seems to be a lot of rumblings within the Chinese. There have been newspaper reports saying that China is extremely disappointed with its negotiators at the NSG, the fact that China was basically left all alone. I mean, nobody is pointing to fingers at these other small countries. So China didn't want to be in this situation where it is
didn't want to get exposed and be isolated in this count.
So I think they are looking at this as probably not a very good thing, because obviously they had to come out in the open. They didn't want to do that. Despite the fact that we didn't get in, we have the moral high ground now, because they did something that was so blatantly outrageous in a sense that they will have to sort of make up now. So in a sense, to some extent, it depends on that game, and maybe that gives us some leverage. I mean, so it's ultimately leverage.
Let's see whether that moral high ground can be leveraged to India's advantage. But we'll take a short break here and come back and then discuss more that what is the way forward and how we can persuade China. But at the moment, we'll take a break.
Duty called me to the ocean to ride its waves and protect our waters, to prowl beneath its surface and seek the enemy, to take wing from the waters and attack from above. In return, the ocean gave me opportunities to discover capabilities I never knew I had, to inspire me for battle, to earn the respect of my country. The Navy gives you more.
Indian Navy, an ocean of opportunities.
Welcome back. We are discussing India's attempt to get into the nuclear suppliers group and the nuclear commerce and the nuclear world that is there. Mr. Ranade, we were speaking about the so-called high ground India may have gained in this. What has China lost? I mean, we have been saying that China has exposed itself by showing its hand, and its animus towards India has come out quite openly. Do you think that is the case?
Yes, and I think that will have an effect. After all, so far, China has always tried to take cover behind someone else and then, oppose us. Even as far as the admission in the UN Security Council is concerned, they have been working in active collusion with Pakistan. And to our diplomats, they've been saying that our main grouse is not against India, it's against Japan, whom we want to keep out. But of course, their objective is very clear. So now, for the first time, I would say in many years, they've actually been exposed. Their position has been exposed.
That's right.
And do they want to continue to be in a situation where they are the single voice opposing India's admission? I think they'll have to take a call on that.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of leverages that we also have.
Right.
One, we are now in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I agree that China has all the friends there.
Yes.
But it's not that we also don't have some leverage or at least,
Some presence there.
Some presence, some value. But in outfits like the AIIB and the BRICS Bank.
Exactly.
These are organizations that Chinese have set up to fund their One Belt, One Road.
Sure.
And I think, two can play the same game.
Yes.
I'm not saying that we will, but that option is there. Similarly, even in the bilateral relation, overall relationship itself,
Yes.
does China want a relationship which is not friendly?
To jeopardize the overall relationship?
So they have to take a call on that.
Right.
And I think, we have, and they have a lot of trade with us.
Exactly.
I don't personally subscribe to this thing that it's really a good thing, because there's a lot of, we have an adverse balance. It's almost $54 billion or something.
Right.
And most of our natural resources are the ones which are being sold to them.
Right.
So, but the Chinese companies here in India are making a lot of profit.
Right.
So, all these factors will come in, and I'm sure they'll take an evaluation. And just to get back to the point that was made about the differences within the Chinese leadership,
Right.
what I read was actually that their negotiator, Wang Chun, he was pulled up, as he rightly said, for not ensuring that there were others supporting.
Who got the blame.
Yes. So I think it's there is a way forward, and I think personally that it was a good move that we did take the call when we did.
Right.
I personally saw our foreign affairs establishment getting energized after a long time and being led from the front.
Great.
So I think it's a good move. That has
And I
happened.
think China wouldn't want to be seen, given its
Yes.
rise, to be an immature power or an irresponsible power.
Exactly. They might wind up pushing us even closer to the
Closer
US,
to the
which
US,
they wouldn't
then
want.
then they wanted really. But coming back to the leverages that India can have, there is one school of thought I read somewhere, or at least in 2-3 places, that now that India is the member of the MTCR, could that be, and China is not, could that possibly be a leverage, and should India use that leverage?
Well, I mean, these kinds of leverages you can use depending on how much the other side wants it. I mean, so to some extent, the question is, it depends on how valuable it is to China. So China has tried before to get into the MTCR, but hasn't been successful.
Right.
So if they want to, then yes, it definitely gives us some leverage. But they are very, very smart at these kinds of games. I mean, I think so.
No, and I think
we need to sort of,
our establishment, the External Affairs Ministry, has also made it clear that we are not going to use that leverage, because it's not something that India has really adapted or has a great record. And I don't know, you will be able to correct me, but should India play that card at all if push comes to shove?
We can see it at that time, but nevertheless, as they say that when you have a card like that, a sort of Damocles almost, whether to use it or not is our option. I mean, it's there. The Chinese know it's there.
Correct.
And it's all a question of, as you said, how seriously they want to get in. I mean, how desperate they are.
Correct.
So I think, as I said, there are many factors that we have with us which we can use, and there are many areas which can be spoilt if the relationship continues like this.
True.
And I think the option finally is with Beijing to take a call on this.
Absolutely. And it will spoil even the bilateral relationship, which is on the upswing in many other cases, except for the boundary issue and perhaps the NSG one right now. And of course, Pakistan is always the factor in India-China relations. What do you think is the Pakistan factor? How long will it play, or how effectively it will spoil or create tension between India and China?
Well, I would say that with this China-Pakistan economic corridor, which was announced, and they've concluded 51 projects, contracted for 51 projects, the nature of the China-Pakistan relationship has changed.
Right.
I know that relationship has been close for decades now.
Sure.
But with this, what we are seeing is China literally binding Pakistan to China. So we see a
client state, really.
a distinct military component, a distinct effort to create economic dependency of Pakistan on China, and a Chinese presence. So we are going to see, I mean, they have already told Islamabad that they will be raising a private army which they'll be deploying in POK, Gilgit, Baltistan, etc. So things like that. I think this has changed the nature of the relationship. So Pakistan, it's not so much Pakistan doing the lobbying with China. It's, you know, China sort of using Pakistan
to do
so I think this factor is important.
Right.
And for us, the way the military reforms have taken place by China and the new West zone has been created, I think it certainly makes it clear to us that there is Chinese deployment on both our fronts.
There is a subject to talk about separately, I think, but what next? I mean, you know, in terms of NSG, in the nuclear suppliers group, by the end of the year, we are told that there could be another plenary and there could be another push. Do you foresee that?
I think there is, because I mean, I would, I mean, in the sense that there is, as of now, it does seem very clear that the Americans want to do that, that there is intention on, obviously, we want to do, push other countries to do that. And there are a number of, in 2008, when we got the waiver, that was how it was done. It was a special plenary that which granted us a waiver, so it can be done again. It's still early days, though. I mean, you know, it's you know, we're still getting over the after effects of this meeting. So, so it will take a little bit of a few weeks before we figure out how exactly that plenary or when that plenary should take place. I think President Obama does not want to leave with this sort of failure on his record. I mean, so the Americans do have an interest in making sure that if they hadn't attempted it, it would have been, you know, it would have been one thing. But to have attempted it and then failed at it, I think they do want to set the record straight. And so, though they do want to, I think they want to do it. We want to do it. A number of other countries want to do it. It's a question of getting the mechanics right, getting the
timing right,
and the timing right.
And this gives us a time to lobby the others.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But of course, there is this question that the American administration is the outgoing administration. It's going to be a lame duck president by the time we approach end of the year. And we don't know who will be the next president and how that next president or next administration will play up. But do you think, would you agree to one school of thought which says that the US didn't lobby hard enough or didn't push other countries hard enough like they did in 2008? Do you see any parallels in that?
Well, I don't think the US, given its present position, would like a situation where it loses face. And that is what has happened in a way with them backing us, I think. So, as you rightly said, they are certainly going to try and push now. And I don't think President Obama wants to leave with this kind of a legacy. So I would expect that they would also now lean on the other countries. And we would certainly lobby the other countries and try and get our way in. And as far as the US is concerned, the US-China relationship is so intense, I would say. They're talking to each other at the same time in a friendly tone while shouting each other, you know, on the other hand. But they're meeting once a day at some place or the other officially. So I think even there, we might see the US trying to nudge China into supporting us.
But there's something that we haven't talked about. What about India-China bilateral relationship? In the sense that India is also talking to China quite frequently and at the highest levels. Is there a case that India could perhaps also push China or at least persuade China to see reason and say that we can get admitted into this? Or you think China will continue to oppose India's entry into NSG?
Well, our relationship with China is not as intense as the Americans, obviously. They have, I think, over 17 flights a day, then they're, you know, meeting once a day somewhere or the other and all that. Their, you know, trade is huge. But we are meeting the Chinese and at fairly high levels, not as frequently, but in the substantive level. We had our Prime Minister talking to Xi Jinping and speaking to him. Mind you, he spoke to him also on the case of Lakhvi, the Lashkar-e-Taiba commander, which is why I said that the China-Pakistan relationship now is so close. It will cast shadow. It will cast a shadow. But I think what you know, what I'm seeing is that India under the new government is trying to change or bring about changes in its policy and its approach towards China. And Modi quite unmistakably in the initial stages did extend an olive branch, did say that we can and should improve our relations.
Right.
But I don't think that we have had the same message coming back from
Sure.
Beijing. So this is still an opportunity. I think there will be another outreach, I'm sure.
Yeah.
As I said, it's difficult to see what China will do.
Right.
My own guess is that they would, if at all they withdraw their opposition,
Yeah.
they'll do it very reluctantly. They certainly don't want to see us rising.
Right. But, apart from the politics of it or the international diplomacy, what is the advantage India would get for the benefit of our viewers if India enters into the NSG? Why is it important to get into the NSG as a nuclear expert?
Yeah, the NSG, as I was saying earlier, is the group that makes all the rules with regard to nuclear commerce.
Right.
And to the extent that we are not in that group, and the way that it makes the rules is based on consensus, which means that any country that opposes that consensus means that no action gets taken.
Right.
So in a sense, it is possible if you are inside the group that you can prevent potentially negative adverse changes to the rules. I mean, as recently as 2011,
Right.
the NSG changed rules with regard to enrichment and reprocessing technologies,
Sure.
like what are called ENR technologies,
Yeah.
and they said no more ENR technologies to be transferred to any country that didn't already have it.
Correct.
So that potentially could hurt us because we were not inside.
Right.
Even though the United States and Russia and other countries have said we will exclude India from that.
Yes.
But so these are the kind of things. I mean, basically it's a rule-making body, and that's its primary purpose. It was set up as a rule-making body, and so you need to be inside a rule-making body to make sure that the rules that are made
Are not against you.
or do not go against your
Right.
interest. And so and maybe potentially also to make rules that will help you. For example, in future, we may want to start, if our nuclear industry gets going,
Right.
we may want to export, and so that
Sure,
again
that
you
makes
need
it
to have-
easier if you are
it makes
part
it
of the
easier if
NSG.
you're part of that.
So on that note, I think we have run out of time completely, but I think we've had a substantial discussion, and I think the way forward is fraught with pitfalls. But certainly India's effort to get into the nuclear suppliers group is laudable and should be continued as one sees it. All that remains for me is to say thank you to both my panelists and for this substantive discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.